Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discuss Palestinian narratives and digital shifts during this ongoing time of crisis. My name is Eric Sipe, and I am the U.S. National Organizer for Hamla, the Arab Center for the Advancement of Social Media. Hamla is a Palestinian digital rights organization that fights for a free, fair, and safe digital space for all Palestinians. Today, I am joined by Nadim Nashif, the founder and general director of Hamla, Diana Boutou, who is a lawyer, writer, and activist, and Saja Mortada, who is a manager at the Arab Fact Checkers Network. As we move through our webinar today, we will move from a series of moderated questions for each of our speakers and then end with some time for a Q&A from the audience. Please, throughout the webinar, direct your questions to the Q&A feature through Zoom, and we will try to get to or consolidate as many of your questions at the end of the webinar as possible. But with that said, what we're really here today to talk about is, over the past week and a half, the world has watched online as one of the largest crises in recent memory unfolds in Palestine. As the crisis has developed, online platforms have foregone their responsibilities and once again played a fundamental role in shaping the global understanding and response. As mass misinformation and disinformation spread rampantly and unchecked in the first days, we saw the president of the United States openly lie on international television about seeing documentation of Hamas doing unspeakable things to babies that simply does not exist. Hate speech and incitement to violence against Palestinians in Hebrew has gone unmoderated and proliferated across many social media networks, with real-world consequences for Palestinians on the ground and globally. Meanwhile, Palestinian journalists and human rights defenders trying to document their on-the-ground realities have been censored and silenced again and again. So to ground us in this conversation, Nadim, I'd like to start with you. And as we both have been working closely with Hamla's monitoring and documentation team, we've seen what social media platforms have done with their current response, and we've seen how Palestinian voices have been censored while incitement and violence targeting Palestinians in Hebrew has gone unchecked. So can you tell us a little bit about what has been happening on social media and why it's happening right now?
Yes, thank you, Eric, and welcome everybody. So as in many other rounds of escalations, normally there's always this attempt that comes to try to hold the narrative and control the narrative that's happening there and to tune down the voices that are coming to defend the Palestinian rights. Normally this happens in different ways, and there are ways that we got used to in previous rounds of escalations, such as the whole issue of using shadow banning, using we had also the issue that you are not allowed to comment on certain profiles. Basically, if you're not friends of those profiles, even that those profiles are public. We had cases of preventing the hashtag Tufan al-Aqsa. So Tufan al-Aqsa is the Arabic name of that. I mean, all Arabic speakers are calling the right now war on Gaza Tufan al-Aqsa. So Tufan al-Aqsa, if you want to see related content to that, you will not have the possibility to do so. While if I compare Kharavot Barzel, which is the Hebrew hashtag for what's going on right now, obviously it's very free and you can see everything that's happening around this and any content that is related to that. We learned lately also that even comments that are happening or posts that are happening around the right now situation, when they are going into the feed, they would prevent the first two comments from commenting them. So I'm telling you all these technical stuff to say how with certain measures that they are doing, they are controlling the narrative and trying like to make sure that content that's coming from this area specifically is not going out, and it stays as much as possible and it gets as less as possible reach. So we normally say like shadow banning in general, but I mean, this is not only the stories and the reels that are not are limited in reachability. This is also a series of actions that the platform is taking. We understood in the past that there is a certain protocol when they want to tune down certain content that they are using, and apparently they are using this on the Palestinian content. In the last interview between Meta representative and the Israeli news website Ynet, they were saying that they took down 2.2 million comments, 2.2 million comments in Arabic and Hebrew. Comments and posts, and obviously they would never, and we have been asking this repeatedly, like, okay, publish how much, what's the percentage, how much of those are Arabic and how much are Hebrew, give some transparency. Obviously transparency is something that is not existing there. So all these measures and all these things that are happening in order to make sure that the voices that are coming from the field are not reaching out to different places. But adding to that, what makes it much more worse even is also limiting journalists. So we have been dealing in Hamle with so many cases of journalists and media outlets that have been restricted. The most famous one of them is Al-Quds Network, which basically they canceled totally the page. We're talking about a page that had more than 8 million followers. And again, there is no transparency about those decisions that they are taking. And we all know how much it's important to have the journalists, the media outlets speaking freely and covering all what's happening on the ground, especially in times of crisis where you want basically the people to have credible sources of what's happening on the ground, and in times that they need this information to where to go, etc. But also in this period, we have been watching lots of phenomena of disinformation, which happened, for example, if I compare like May 2021, there were at that time also lots of disinformation, but I think the level of disinformation that we are facing, I mean, it starts like from AI generated pictures to the level that even the heads of the states, like the president of the Israeli state and the president of the United States, all of them are engaging in this machine of disinformation and trying to cast the narrative and to control the narrative. And to a certain extent, unfortunately, they did succeed, at least in the first week, because there was a kind of total block. So imagine this picture. You have the mainstream media totally controlled and speaking in one narrative on one side, the Israeli side. On the other hand, you have the social media platforms tuning down the Palestinian voice and preventing it from reach out to the outside. So you have a total control on what's happening. And the audience, especially the audience in the Western countries, are hearing only one narrative, one song, one melody, and that keeping with the same messaging pumping. But beyond the disinformation, there was a lot of incitement. There's like a flood, basically, a flood of incitement and hate speech that's happening in Hebrew against Palestinians and Arabs. I mean, we today published in Hamle basically our violence indicator, and our violence indicator is basically a language model that is based on AI that is scanning the social media and trying to get all these tweets around Gaza, around what's happening, the operations, the war, etc. And we detected until today noon, I guess by now it's much more than 103,000 tweets and posts that are insightful and are containing racial speech and hate speech and calling for direct attack. This is happening in the same time that this is the general one, but there were also very coordinated digital attacks that were happening against certain Palestinian personalities, especially Palestinians who are citizens of Israel, Palestinians who are living in Jerusalem, where they can also reach them easier. So these phenomena are happening and they are growing, and the police and the politicians and the official establishment, I mean, in the past, maybe these phenomena were more related to certain kind of groups that are more to the right wing of the Israeli map. Now this is like the mainstream, unfortunately, from the left, if there is any left, till the extreme right. Everybody is engaging in that. You would see Limchoket Gaza, which means erase Gaza, as a in Ayalon Street, which is the main street of Tel Aviv, as a banner. So this becomes something that we never faced that level of incitement. Lastly, I want also to speak about the attempts to legislate, like also kind of draconian, crazy legislation. So Shlomo Karei, the Israeli Minister of Telecommunication, he has this new idea that he wants to criminalize people if they consume too much terrorist content. So basically, if you are a journalist and you are watching videos of Hamas, you would be criminalized for that. I'm not saying sharing, I'm not saying identifying, praising, or whatever. I'm just saying that you're watching videos coming from Gaza because you want to learn about the situation in Gaza from certain Palestinian groups that by the Israeli law are defined as terrorists, then you will be criminalized and you can go for several years to jail. To that level of draconian and weird thoughts that we never faced before. So those are, in a nutshell, like the main points that we have been watching on the social media environment and the laws and legislations attempting to control them even more.
Thanks, Nadeem, for contextualizing the scope of the issue for us. Saja, I would love to bring you in now. And one of the things that we heard from Nadeem, and I think that we've all seen for ourselves, is that misinformation and disinformation have spread widely over the past week and a half. As a journalist and a fact checker working in the region, what can you tell us about what you have seen as you've been monitoring the situation?
Okay, hello everyone. First of all, mercy to the martyrs and healing to the wounded. What's happening to the Palestinians in Gaza is in the mildest terms a genocide and an ethnic cleansing, a massacre against innocent civilians. And unfortunately, the world is just watching without any action. I stand with the Palestinian people first because I am from the Arab world who believes in the rights of Palestinians to return their land. Secondly, as a Lebanese, that Palestine is my neighbor and that my country was under Israeli occupation for more than 15 years. And finally, as a journalist and fact checker, that salutes all my colleagues working day and night to cover this genocide. We have lost a lot of dear colleagues and friends in the last few days that were killed by Israel just to be silenced. And since the beginning of the aggression on Gaza, we as the Arab Fact Checkers Network from Arij have taken it upon ourselves to monitor false and misleading information, in addition to support the fact-checking community in the Arab world to ensure the delivery of accurate and truthful information to the public, and to combat the Israeli propaganda and the disinformation that's spreading against Palestinians. I will share my screen now to present to you some examples of misinformation against Palestinians that have been spreading lately. Just give me 1 second. I hope you can see my screen now. Just, Eric, you can confirm that to me. Okay. Unfortunately, the misinformation that's spreading now regarding the war and regarding Palestine on social media, not just on social media, even on the media, even by politicians and public figures and influencers also, is contributing to inciting war crimes against Gaza and against Palestinians. Just to understand in general how misinformation is spreading around aggression on Gaza nowadays. First of all, through propaganda. And the propaganda is led by the Israeli government that's using the propaganda as a tool to shape the public opinion and control information. And that includes, of course, fabricated stories, manipulated content, images and videos generated by AI, and designed to elicit a specific emotional response. And I will give some examples of that later. The second thing is the rumors and fear. In general, during war, war often generates fear and uncertainty. It's a fertile ground for the spread of rumors and misinformation. People are feeling scared all the time, so they might believe anything they see on social media. And misinformation can be spread rapidly as people seek to make sense of any chaotic and dangerous and scary situations they see and they monitor on social media. The third thing is the enemy dehumanization. And this is what Israel is doing, unfortunately, and focusing on lately. Israel is dehumanizing the Palestinians during the war. This involves portraying them as less human, making it easier for people to accept false or exaggerated claims about their actions. And I will show also some examples. The social media. In general, the social media, and especially now, Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, has significantly amplified the speed and reach of information dissemination. And during the war, the information goes very, very viral and creates a lot of uncertainty and a lot of distorted view of events. So social media platforms also, as Nadim mentioned, can be part of this and can be spreading propaganda or covering some accurate information because of this propaganda. And the fifth thing is, unfortunately, the lack of verification skills or the lack of critical thinking for a lot of people, because especially that in the middle of a war and a crisis, it can be very challenging for journalists and fact checkers, and we are noticing that now, to verify a lot of information spreading online. Inaccurate information may be reported due to the difficulty of access conflict zones, the risks to reporters, or intentional efforts to restrict access and control information. Now I will give some examples of these 5 aspects of spreading misinformation. The first one is related to the rumors and the fake news that was spreading related to the Palestinians are responsible of the hospital massacre 2 days ago. A lot of videos and photos that were published by Israeli officials and by politicians and by Israeli people were old videos, and some of them are not even related at all to the hospital. And a lot of fact checkers have been working on that. And a lot of fact checkers have also fact-checked the lies that the Israeli government said, especially during the press conference of the IDF yesterday morning. A second example is what the US President Biden falls off. So it wasn't just a lie and news that was spread through social media and through media organizations, but also the US president spread this lie. And he lied about seeing photos of beheaded Israeli children by Hamas. And this was fake and was fact-checked, but by all fact-checking organizations around the world. The third example is an example, and here we are speaking about dehumanization. So there is a lot of videos and photos spreading online about Hamas or Palestinians in general treating Israeli hostages or Israeli settlers in an unhuman way. So some videos and photos show children, old videos about children in cages, old videos about some soldiers treating people in a very bad way is spreading now, as they are from Gaza, and as Hamas is dealing with the hostages and with the settlers in Gaza. Examples of the news, of fake news that spread to make people scared and take decisions, quick decisions, is the news that are spreading regarding the clashes between Hezbollah and Israel in Lebanon now. And a lot of fake news were spreading about that thousands of Lebanese people were leaving South Lebanon after the clashes. And a lot of pictures and videos of old pictures and videos were spreading regarding that, to make people feel fear and start leaving their homes in Lebanon to go to more safer places rather than being in South Lebanon. So this is in general what I wanted to share, and giving some examples. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Saja, for those powerful examples. Diana, if I could bring you in now, we've just heard about hate speech, incitement to violence, censorship, and disinformation campaigns that are fairly clearly seem to be pushing out the intention of justifying collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Can you please share for us how you have seen these factors and others change and shape the global narrative and understanding of this ongoing crisis?
Thank you very much, Eric. And I want to thank Hamle, and I especially wanted to thank Nadim and especially Saja for being on this panel today with me. In terms of how this has actually shaped things, it's been very interesting to watch. I wanted to go back to what Saja was saying, which is the idea of enemy dehumanization. Now, this propaganda, this method, this isn't new for Israel. Israel has been engaging in this for a long period of time. It didn't just start on October the 7th. It started many years ago. So much so that for 75 years now, Israel has spent all of its energy, or much of its energy, on dehumanizing Palestinians, so that it gets to the point that the world, or that they even cannot understand when Palestinians react to the brutal occupation, when they react to the caging in of people for close to 17 years, when they react to the fact that our people get killed on a daily basis, get imprisoned on a daily basis, Israel still holding dead bodies that they're refusing to release, the fact that settlers can actually burn down, try to burn down entire towns, and so on. So all of this has been the process of years and years and years of, as Saja put it, enemy dehumanization. And in this process of any enemy dehumanization, what we saw immediately afterwards was that for many journalists and for much of the international community, history begins on October 7th. It doesn't begin before October 7th. It simply begins on October 7th. And so therefore, because history begins on that day, it then becomes easy for them to do whatever it is that they want to do to Palestinians. This is why it then becomes easy for them to accept Israel's version that they must crush Hamas without ever asking what crushing Hamas actually means. It then also becomes easy for them to ignore the occupation, or to say things like, no matter how many years of occupation can justify what has been done. And you see these statements being repeated over and over and over again by the international diplomatic community, but also by journalists themselves. I've been on many interviews over the course of the past 12 days where the word occupation is only uttered by me. It's as though somehow it magically disappeared. Another thing that we've seen is what both Nadim and Saja have mentioned, which is the absorption of the Israeli talking points. When you get to the point where you have dehumanized Palestinians, there is no reason for you to accept any word that is coming from their mouths. And when there's no reason to accept any word that's coming from their mouths, you then have to turn to the other side and accept wholeheartedly what is coming from the Israeli side. And this is why we heard President Biden come forward and say, I never thought I'd see beheaded babies, but well, you didn't, because you didn't see beheaded babies. And it required people to actually push back. But it wasn't just President Biden. We had a number of people, including Sarah Sidner from CNN, Nick Robertson, also from CNN, Raf Sanchez and others, who continue to repeat these same lines. Now, moving forward, when that lie was found to be a lie, and then we had on Fox News reporters then trying to chase after the only Palestinian member of Congress, Rashida Tlaib, and ask her if she supports the beheading of babies and so on. So the lie became the truth. But it doesn't also stop there. Even since that initial lie has been found to be a lie, the Israelis have continued with this process of dehumanization. And there's something that's very important, Eric, which, I mean, this is not really in Hamda's scope, but a little bit out. People don't know this, but there aren't any foreign journalists that are in the Gaza Strip because Israel doesn't allow them in. So even in the reporting, in the way that the journalists are reporting this, they're using the statement, Prime Minister Netanyahu says. Prime Minister Netanyahu says, but they never bother to actually fact check what Prime Minister Netanyahu has said. And this is a man who's had a history of lying, who's had a history of putting forward propaganda slogans and so on. And so this is the way that we've seen the media shaped over the course of the past 12 days, that nothing in the world compares to what happened on October the 7th, that nothing that Israel does will ever make up for or exceed what happened on October 7th, that no matter what Israel says, that it is somehow the truth, and no matter what Palestinians say, no matter what the history says, because we've been so dehumanized, we simply have to accept what Israel has done to us, and we don't have the ability to tell the actual truth, to say our own truth. Add to this what both Seja and Nadim have said of everything from minimizing Palestinian voices to shadow banning, to all of these sorts of things. You see that for the everyday journalist, what they're simply getting, or the consumer of media, what they're getting is simply one side, without ever seeing what this means for Palestinians and what the impact is on Palestinians.
Thank you so much, Diana, for that really helpful perspective on trying to understand the situation. Nadim, if I can bring it back to you and to social media's role once again, what are the real world on the ground impacts of what we've been seeing play out on social media?
So basically, the result is that, as I also mentioned earlier, that there's lots of incitement, and this incitement is not something theoretical. This is something that is happening on the social media and translating itself into the real world, because unfortunately, we have been suffering from this also in the past. We have the experience of Sheikh Jarrah, May 2021, where basically groups were organizing themselves to attack Palestinian in Jerusalem, but also in 48 Palestinian citizens of Israel, including in Haifa, for example. They were organizing themselves in chat applications and social media, etc. We have been seeing this also in Hawara. In Hawara in February, late February this year, there was an attack, there was a pogrom, they attacked, they killed, they shoot. But there was a build-up, because we did the research of the social media the 2 months before, specifically on X platform, that gives like a free hand for everybody to incite without any minimum kind of content moderation in Hebrew. And basically the result of this build-up on the social media, that there was this attack, and we show it clearly in numbers and figures and terminology that have been used there. So this is something that is really going from the virtual to the real world harm. And we are seeing it now again and again, because now it's happening in two kind of ways. One way, there are people who are working together in the same factory or business or company. There are people who are studying together in the same college or university. I'm speaking now more specifically in the context of Jerusalemites and 48ers or Palestinian citizens of Israel. And then your colleagues are watching you. your colleagues are watching your social media and recording whatever you are saying, even if you're saying the minimum sympathy with the people in Gaza, that there are children who are being killed, there are babies who are being killed, or sharing any kind of video, you would be attacked. There will be screenshots of your social media. It would be sent to the management. We have tens of cases of students who have been expelled from their academic study because they shown any kind of sympathy. I was speaking yesterday with a lecturer. She's a lecturer, a Palestinian lecturer in one of the colleges in the south, in the Naqab. And basically her own students were searching in her Facebook account. They reached to a post where there is a Palestinian flag from May 2021, and they went to the management of the college and asked her to be expelled. We are talking about situation of hundreds of people that have been expelled from their work. Legal centers like Adala and others here are overwhelmed, like dealing with these cases, because literally there are hundreds of people who have been suffering from that. But beyond that, beyond this kind of organized, organized like your colleagues, and how much tension there are also groups who are organized. They are coordinating digital attacks on famous personalities. And I can tell you the case of Dalal Abu Amni. Dalal Abu Amni, she's a famous Palestinian singer, but she's also an academic, a researcher in the Technion Institute. And basically, some of the Technion students and others were watching her profile. They started groups inciting against her. We have been there trying to resolve some of the cases because there was like very clear incitement and calling for violence against her and her family. And it reached also a situation there where they're publishing the workplace of her husband with a clear call to attack also on him. All this pressure, and we're talking about like thousands of posts. So this is something unbelievable. Thousands of posts inciting against her and her husband, including horrible messages in her inbox. Dalal, she went to seek help from the police. She went to the police to complain because there are calls to murder me and my family. And she's living in a place that predominantly is a Jewish residence. So also walking in the street could be something very dangerous for him. In brief, basically the police arrested her. The police, instead of protecting her because she's complaining on the incitement, the police told her, you are actually the one who's inciting because you are paying solidarity with Gaza and with the children of Gaza. And she spent 2 nights in jail. Later on, she was released with the restrictions from the court. So those are only like small examples of how violence on the social media is translating itself into the real world, and call basically to go out and to attack Palestinians, specifically Palestinians who are living in mixed cities in Jerusalem and areas that you could be theoretically walking in a Jewish majority neighborhood, and then you are threatened and you could be paying prices, and heavy prices that people are paying in their work and in their college and in their study. The situation is I mean, we had these cases in 2021, but now this is escalating to really levels that are really unprecedented, and we never had this before.
Thank you, Nadeem, for sharing much needed, very, very sad information here. To continue, I'd like to go back to Saja. And as I think everyone has mentioned at this point, the mainstream Western media has really played into these disinformation campaigns. As a fact checker and an investigative journalist, how bad has the response been, in your opinion?
Actually, it was very, very bad. And unfortunately, they killed all the journalism principles: transparency, accuracy, standing next to the people, fighting and combating human rights violations, exposing corruption and wrongdoings. They killed all these principles, and they did deadly mistakes that led to more losing the trust of the people and the trust of the public on their news and their coverage. I will share my screen also and give some examples of what we have witnessed in the last few days. So some of the mistakes that mainstream media and global media organizations and journalists did. One of them was the BBC, when they said that the protest that was close to their office, to the headquarters in London, was pro Hamas, not pro-Palestine protesters in UK. And they later apologized for this mistake, and they said that it was a misleading coverage and misleading title or a description of what happened during that day. The second example, the CNN reporter also, as the US President Biden, she said that Hamas beheaded babies, and she apologized later because she said that she has defended the Israeli claims regarding this thing. The third thing is Reuters. Actually, Reuters didn't have the courage, wasn't even able to say and mention clearly that Israel killed its cameraman Issam Abdullah in South Lebanon last week. And actually, after being targeted and being criticized by a lot of people on social media, they have tried to make it better, and they have tried to change the description and saying that the missiles were from the side of Israel, but they didn't even manage to explain and to describe what happened accurately. And this was like one of the biggest mistakes, and this was like a shock for journalists around the world, because Issam had worked more than 16 years with Reuters, and he believed on his job, and he was doing his duties, and he was killed. And even the organization that he has been working for many, many years didn't mention the killer, the accurate information about the killer. A fourth example is Ben Shapiro, the influencer, the media presenter and the columnist, who is actually influencing more than 6 million people on social media, just on his Twitter account. He is spreading lies every day. And a lot of fact checkers are working on fact checking what he is publishing, because he is all the time publishing old pictures, old videos from other countries that blame Hamas for a lot of crimes and a lot of massacres, and this is actually, and Ben Shapiro is not the only one. There are a lot of journalists and influencers on social media that are doing the same thing, and I try to cover Israeli massacres and war crimes, and try to say that the Palestinians are responsible of what's happening now, or what will continue to happen. And one of the last examples is this screenshots from the New York Times, and how they changed the title of their piece on the Israeli attack on the hospital 2 days ago. So first they said that Israeli strike kills hundreds in hospital, and then at least 500 dead in strike on Gaza hospital, Palestinian said, and then at least 500 dead in blast at Gaza hospital. So in like few minutes, they changed the whole story and the whole idea of what happened. And this wasn't just the New York Times, but a lot of other media organizations and important media organizations. So unfortunately, they failed in their coverage. They failed in being also standing next to their journalists. So we are witnessing now that a lot of journalists are leaving their work in BBC and CNN and other big media organizations, because they are witnessing the fake news spreading by these media organizations. And here at the Arab Fact-Checking Network also, we all believe on the idea of the importance of pre-publication fact-checking. If they do pre-publication fact-checking, if they give like some few minutes to check the information before spreading it, this will be better, and this will like avoid a lot of mistakes and a lot of fake news to be spread for people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Saja, for just making it so clear exactly how bad it has been. Diana, going back to you, it really seems like what we're talking about here is information warfare. With Nadim sharing how online violence leads to real world harm, Saja speaking about the difficulties of finding the truth. Can you speak to how all of this has shaped and impacted the international community's response to the situation?
Oh, Eric, I wish there was a response. That's the big problem. Look, I think it's important, just to pick up on what Seja said. Seja correctly highlighted the times where people have apologized, but there have been scores where they haven't yet apologized, and I'm certain will not apologize because they've so much absorbed the Israeli narrative. Look, just the other day on Fox News, there was a commentator who talked about Palestinians in ways that were abhorrent, that nobody around the world likes them, that everywhere they go, they cause problems, that every Palestinian is a person of Hamas. And this, of course, is not coming from nowhere, but it's coming from the higher ups. When you have somebody like the Israeli president, Herzog, saying there are no innocents in Gaza, it then gets filtered down to the commentators, gets filtered down to the journalists, and then spread around the world. How has the response been? Well, atrocious. First, we've seen people like US candidates, presidential candidates, come out and say things like Nikki Haley, who said to Netanyahu, finish them, or Lindsey Graham, who came out and said that Gaza should be completely flattened, or somebody like Ron DeSantis, who said that he wants to pass legislation barring Palestinians from even entering the United States. Now, replace the word Palestinian with Jewish, and you can see how inflammatory, what the level of hatred is that's there. But it even goes beyond that. So far, the response by the international community, because there's this level of dehumanization, has been not to call for a ceasefire. It took the Secretary General of the United Nations, the very body that is supposed to be making sure that there's peace and security around the world. It took him 12 days, 12 whole days to call for a ceasefire, 12 whole days for him to demand that Israel stop bombing. And he's the only one. In terms of the Western European nations, nobody has been calling for Israel's halt on the bombing campaign. There have been very meek calls to allow humanitarian supplies into the Gaza Strip. Now, this is my legal hat. All of this is illegal. You can't. There are things that are illegal in war, and not allowing humanitarian supplies in is one of them. Turning off the water is illegal. Turning off fuel is illegal. Turning off the electricity is illegal. Not treating the dead and not treating the wounded is illegal. Not allowing the dead to be buried is all illegal. And we've heard very tepid remarks by the international community to allow for humanitarian supplies, but also in a way that is also like feeding into what Israel wants. So only being in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, only being for the south of the Gaza Strip. In other words, allowing for the mass either displacement, which there has been, 1.1 million Palestinians have already been displaced, allowing for the mass displacement, or even worse, which is now what they're talking about, the mass expulsion of Palestinians to the Sinai. So the response has been, you can see how all of this has shaped itself. Everything from the lack of accurate information getting out, to the levels of dehumanization, to the media being complicit in it. And you see the international response to this. Now, fortunately, there are people of good conscience around the world who are not believing any of these lies, and who, despite all of these efforts, are searching past, and who recognize that you can't bomb a civilian population. Gaza Strip, for those who are in the United States who understand this, the Gaza Strip is the size of Detroit, with 4 times the population of Detroit. It's a small place. To have more bombs dropped on that one place by Israel in 6 days than were dropped on all of Afghanistan by the United States in 1 year is telling you something. To have more children, 3 times the number of kids killed in Gaza in 12 days than were killed in 18 months in the Ukraine Russia war, It's showing you exactly the level of humanitarian disaster. And fortunately, there are people of good conscience around the world who are seeing through all of this and who are demanding that this stop. But on the international response, the formal international response, it is simply not there.
Yeah, it really simply is not, and it's been truly disheartening. To go back to our last round of questions before we'll try to open it up for some Q&A at the end here. We'll turn it back to you, Nadeem. And we know, and those of you who have paid attention to recent efforts, there has been much ado about new legislation and regulations for big tech, but none of that has seemed to protect the Palestinian people from an abysmal response by social media platforms during this crisis. We know that the UN created the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and that too seems to be insufficient for this moment. So what do we need from social media companies, and how can civil society help to push for that?
Yes, so basically, I mean, there are community standards, and there are content moderation policies that the companies put in place. But the problem is not that. The problem is the enforcement, because in the end of the day, are they doing equal enforcement in everywhere? And the answer is not. Because their enforcement is according to their interest in that state, and politics get into it. And we have to understand also the map of interest, because in the end of the day, this is not only a problem Israel-Palestine. This the problem of the patterns of behavior of social media companies, specifically Meta, is repeating itself. It's repeating itself with India and Kashmir. It's repeating itself in Myanmar and Rohingya. And they have been doing horrible content moderation policy that also contributed to genocide and to transfer and forced eviction of the population there. If we are speaking about Kashmir, for example, and the Indian government, they refused even to publish the human rights report about the Indian government, because they're so scared of the Indian government, and they consider it, one of the huge markets that they want the profit. So it's a mix between political interests and powerful governments and markets and money and profit, and where the company can make a profit. And this deadly mix of interest, in the end, this is the result that we are seeing in the policies and the horrible policies of the companies that are out there. But what we want from the company is basically to do the policies, to do the enforcement in an equal and in a just way, in a fair way, not because this government is powerful or this market is important for us, so we do something else. Not because Ukraine is part of our collective identity, white identity, so we do exceptions for the Ukrainians. And Ukraine, to call for resistance is something powerful that Meta would support you, but to do so in other places, you're a terrorist and we need to block you. So this kind of double standard that's happening is beyond annoying. We want a safe platform for everybody. We want no harm done to any civilians. We don't want to call for incitement, hate speech, racism, gender-based violence. All the bad phenomena that we are knowing from those platforms should be prevented, but they are the implementation should be equal for everybody again. And there are certain issues that should be taken care by the platforms. One of them, for example, is the governments and their relationship with the governments. This is one of the no transparency at all. We know, for example, that the Israeli cyber unit took down 2,500 posts through requesting that to Meta lately. But we don't know it from Meta. We know it from the head of the cyber unit, who's bragging to the media, I did take down this amount or that amount. I got 90%, again, 90% positive reply from Meta on my requests. So the funny thing, you would ask Meta, like, okay, publish the figures. I mean, anyway, the other side is publishing it. Why aren't you publishing it? And they refuse to do so. And we ask this not only for Israel-Palestine, we ask it for everybody. As a digital rights organization, we want to have transparency. The other part is the automation transparency. The automation doesn't have any transparency. The content automation is a kind of a black box. Nobody understands how this is working. The third point is the dangerous organizations list, which and individual list, which according to this DOI list, content, specifically Palestinian content, is being taken down. Now we know from the leak that happened a few years ago from The Intercept, when we looked at the lists, the vast majority were coming from the Arab and Muslim background from this region and Southeast Asia. There were hardly any white supremacist groups, for example. The ones who were entire three, which is the less strict. If we compared like Palestinians' names and Israeli names, we had 55 Palestinian names and one Israeli name, one person and his organization, Ben-Zvi Goldstein and his Lahava. So even organization like Kach organization, which is defined by the Israeli law and by the American law as terrorist organization, was not in the list. So this is also like to show you how much this is something that is very disturbing. Other part of that is also the whole issue of commitment to work also with civic society that have been asked for a long time, and there is no commitment from the side. And lastly, again, going back to the hate speech, some of the platforms do have, and just to say that Meta did some progress because now they had, starting from summer 2023, they have a Hebrew classifier and they are taking down some of the incitement that's happening in Hebrew. But for example, X, there's hardly anything that they are taking down from Hebrew incitement. If we speak about Telegram, again, the same story. So there are platforms that are very problematic and they are encouraging by their passive content moderation policy on Hebrew. Basically, they are encouraging incitement more and more on those platforms.
Thank you, Nadeem. Saja, as we're trying to move into understanding what can be done, I know that the Arab Fact Checkers Network is doing quite a bit to support fact checkers and initiate collaborations. Can you share with us about the network's work and how you are responding to this moment?
Yes, of course. Before sharing this information, I just want, because I saw several questions in the Q&A and the chat about how we can fight misinformation during such a crisis, or at least how we can reduce the amount of fake news and misinformation spreading on social media. So there is several techniques, several strategies. Some of them are first critical thinking. The idea of not believing everything we see on social media, any video, any picture, any information, any number. Okay, we are under a very stressful period of time, but we need to be careful. We need to think about anything and analyze anything we see before sharing it and publishing it, because if it was fake, we will be contributing and spreading misinformation, even if we don't have the intention to do that. Secondly, the idea of verification. It's not just the work of fact checkers. Okay, fact checkers work on some complicated stuff, but the idea of verification and the verification tools are available for all people, and all people can use them. In addition to checking several sources, when I see something on social media, when I see a news or a picture or videos, I have to try to check if it was published by different sources and who are these sources. What is my evaluation of these sources? Does this source, for example, usually spread misinformation or no? The third thing is we can reach out. Now it's easy to reach out to fact-checking organizations. It's easy to reach out to fact checkers. We can ask those people. They are monitoring social media all the time. They are monitoring media organizations all the time. They are fact-checking all the time. 24/7 they are working now. So we can reach out to them through their social media accounts, through their emails, their numbers. They are all available for all the public to ask about some information that they actually think that they might be inaccurate or false. The headlines, usually the headlines are very attractive, and some media organizations use attractive headlines even if they don't want to spread, if they don't have the intention to spread misinformation, but they do that without even noticing because of the headlines that they use to just get some more likes and more shares and more interaction from people. So we have to be careful when we read any headline and to check before believing it. The source is motivation. What is the motivation of the source? Why the source is actually publishing this information? Why the source is actually insisting about this information and publishing it once and twice and 3 times and every day and all the time and on different platforms and on different formats? Why? We need to ask this question. And at the end, we need to question our own biases. I have to be transparent. I have to be neutral. I have to try to just be in the side of the truth. I have to remove or try to remove all my biases to be accurate about any information. And from here, I want to speak about the efforts of the Arab Fact Checkers Network from Arij. Actually, from the first day of the aggression on Gaza, we have started monitoring the fake news and the misinformation spreading. And we have started also monitoring the work of the fact-checking organizations under AFCN. So till now, we have like 38 fact-checking organizations and initiatives in 11 Arab countries. And we have more than 250 fact-checkers from all over the Arab world. We are now supporting them during this crisis. We have initiated an emergency response to the crisis through different aspects and through different strategies. The first thing, we have opened a Slack workspace where till now more than 50 fact-checking organizations from all over the world, from Europe, from the US, from India, from Latin America, from the Arab world, are working together. They are supporting each other with translation, with fact-checking, with resources, with anything that they might need during this crisis. And this is very, very important. Even they are doing cross-publication. They are publishing together the fact checks they are working on to spread the word more about accurate information. The second thing we are doing is building AFCN Palestine fact-checking database, a database where we are gathering all the work of fact-checking organizations around the world about Palestine. Why this is important? This is important because we will avoid duplication of work, and at the same time, we will be able later to analyze this database to understand how misinformation was spreading against Palestinians and how was our response to it actually. Was it a positive response? Did we do a positive impact? Did we actually succeed in fighting misinformation or no? The third thing is awareness campaigns and media literacy on social media, on our social media accounts, about the importance of fact-checking during such a period of time. We have also a webinar on Saturday that will host different fact-checking organizations from the Arab world that will speak about what they have been witnessing of misinformation and how they are fighting misinformation during this period of time. The fourth thing is getting emergency funds to Palestinian fact-checking organizations. Unfortunately, they are working under very difficult circumstances and they need our support and they need our help, not just to fact-check, but also for their physical safety, for their psychosocial safety, especially that they are working under a huge stress now. And the fifth thing is our fact-checking chatbot in Arabic language. We have 15 fact-checkers working 24/7 to fact-check any information we receive through our chatbot. And this is very important, especially that also the fact-checking organizations are now using the chatbot, not just the general audience, because the fact-checking organizations now, their teams are very small and they don't have the capacity to work a lot during such times. So they are using the chatbot to get support from other fact-checkers from different organizations and different countries. And also we are trying to support with everything we can for fact-checkers so they can be able to continue their work and actually do a great impact to make sure that accurate information are spreading more than misinformation.
Thank you, Saja. Diana, as I think you've already explained pretty explicitly in some of your earlier responses, we know that the global community has been conditioned over decades of targeted anti-Palestinian racism to dehumanize and doubt Palestinians always. So if we know that's true, then what can we do in this moment to try to challenge and upend this global anti-Palestinian narrative?
I think the first thing, Eric, is to label it. And I think that so many of us go into defensive mode and don't actually spend the time, because we don't have that luxury of time, to actually label it. And I'll give you some examples. So immediately, this always happens when something happens to an Israeli. The first thing that happens is that a Palestinian is trotted out onto the news media and they are asked to condemn. And the reason that they are asked to condemn is because it's this litmus test to see whether you are human enough, whether the person that we have on TV, do you fit within what my framework is of who a human is? And so it's gotten so commonplace that that all journalists do this, sometimes subconsciously, because it's just been so ingrained in them. And so what I like to do is I always like to step back and explain to them what it is that they're doing to me, and to also ask them about whether they've ever asked an Israeli if they condemn the Nakba, whether they've asked an Israeli if they condemn the occupation, whether they ask an Israeli about whether they condemn what is being done in their name on a daily basis. Because remember, this isn't an occupation that's being done by remote control or by a foreign army. This is being done by them, by their army, by their people. And so I always try to explain to people what it means to be dehumanized, and how so much of the dehumanization process, so much of the anti-racism process has been so absorbed by them that they don't even see it. So my approach is always to try to educate, to get them to see what it is that they're asking me to do, and why it is, and examine why it is that they're asking me to do it. You know, as Seja was saying, examine your own biases. And it's not perfect, and it's not the only answer, but I do think that we have to spend a lot more time labeling this anti-Palestinian racism in a way that that makes sense. You know, for example, when there were these allegations of rapes and beheadings were happening, this very much matches the Hollywood movies that I grew up watching. Things like Aladdin, you know, Disney movies, where it's Aladdin is the Aladdin, he's the person who chops off your head, and again, it feeds into this idea of anti-Arab racism, anti-Palestinian racism, and Islamophobia. And I think the things that we need to keep doing is labeling it, making people aware of it, and pushing back on all of these forms of racism. Because if we don't do it, it's just going to continue.
Thank you so much. I think that's just really so important. And I acknowledge we are a little bit over the hour at this point. So in terms of Q&A, there's been a lot of great questions in the chat, but the one that continually is coming out again and again is, where should people be going for good information and for understanding this moment? So I think I'll just let all of you give a couple of suggestions for where you would recommend folks go to try to keep up with the ongoing current events and understand this moment. And Nadeem, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's important to find different medias and different independent medias at these days, because they are more, to be honest, more critical and more straightforward. Things that are related to digital rights, you are invited also to follow Hamle social media. We have been reporting a lot about the whole picture of digital rights and aspects, the different violations. because we spoke about Meta, we spoke about X and other platforms, but even there are cases that we are facing that are coming from economical platforms and others. So all the update about the incitement, about content moderation, deplatforming, all these news, you can follow us and we will be updating you on this. There are a few independent media outlets like Mundowise, Palestine Chronicle, 972, and others who are trying to give some news that is more from a different perspective, and I think they are important. I think also there are influencers who are on the ground like Mu'taz and others who are in Gaza and trying to give the situation. I think it would be a good idea maybe to compile a list and share it and circulate it between the ones who are here or others.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and that's certainly something that we can do post webinar. Saja, what do you have in terms of recommendations?
Yeah, actually, I totally agree with Nadim, but I might add, for example, the doctors who are working on hospitals in Gaza can be a very great resource about humanitarian situation. And one of them is a doctor called Ghassan, who is living abroad, but he comes to Gaza every time that an aggression happened on Gaza, and he supports his countries, and he is always spreading on social media information from within from the hospital itself. Other influencers or citizen journalists who are actually not just sharing social media photos and videos on social media, they are live a lot of time. Most of the day they are live, showing what's happening live, and this, I think this is a very important source of information now. And in addition to that, of course, the fact-checking organizations, especially when you feel like something might not be correct, you can reach out to fact-checking organizations or check their work to see if they have fact-checked it or worked on it. Especially that they usually not just say that this information is correct or no, they show that based on evidence and pictures and analysis and sources. And of course, there we have some few independent media organizations that actually are doing good job now, but unfortunately, most of the media organizations are failing in this during this crisis, and this is why there is an importance for fact-checking now and for be very critical and giving time for any information before sharing it on social media.
Thank you so much, Saja. Diana?
Yeah, I lived in Gaza for a time, and so I have many friends there, and I rely on my friends and all of the things that they're telling me, because I have a network that is from the north to the south, and you can very quickly get information. These are also, as Saja and Nadim already mentioned, citizen journalists who aren't necessarily affiliated with any of the big outlets, who are, and let's make this clear, they're risking their lives to make sure that the people around the world are seeing what's happening. I also, I do have to say, Al Jazeera, the Arabic has been incredible with their coverage, in terms of some of the individual journalists who are based in Gaza, Al Dahdouh, and others who have just, again, risked their lives. For Eric, I think I have to say this over and over again, there are no foreign journalists in Gaza. So usually it is the case that a journalist comes in and then they can leave. These are journalists who are going to be spending the rest of their lives in this space. And so they are doing their absolute best to both stay alive and to make sure that people are getting an accurate picture of what's happening. So I think it would be great. There are a number of people that I'm personally following on all the various social media places, and I think that we owe it to them to be following them as well. And I do share the same assessment with Nadim and with Saja, also adding that I think a lot of the live reporting that has been done by Al Jazeera has truly been outstanding.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you all for taking the time to help us understand this current moment. I thank the audience for staying with us even as we go a little bit over. We will go ahead and try to pull together a resource of some suggested media sources for understanding this moment that we can share out with folks afterwards. Wherever you are in the world, I hope that you're staying safe and that you're able to find some moments of joy during this really tragic time. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.